Hello, Richmond area musicians. Thanks for tuning in. I'm talking with Jacob Acosta from Tucson, Arizona, a city with a very alive music culture nestled in a small city of about 530,000 people. He is going to share what he does to compete and make it as an original artist. We'll be covering online marketing, press kits, royalties, and more. Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I was born and raised in Phoenix. I started performing professionally around 2003, 2004-ish time. So I've been performing professionally for about 12 to 13 years. And it was just a long road. You start kind of as this guy playing open mics and songwriter stuff, right? Now at this point, I know how to do the band thing. I've been in many bands, Race You There, Acosta. I'm in Mason now, which is a blues band. I have my own stuff, Jacob Acosta stuff. And I'm actually starting to reach out and do some other projects. I just recently did a deep synth pop record with a DJ in San Francisco named Konrad Sisinski, and we created a group called Hits. So currently, the things that are going on, I'm finishing my third record of my solo records, and it's about Arizona, called Desert Sounds. And then I am also working with a new artist that there's stuff coming down the line named Chris Salen. And so there's other things that are kind of always in the background, but that's part of at least what I've created for, art and music sense. I'm also a jingle writer. I wrote many years of jingles for codeschool.com. I'm the voice of Code School, and I even have students of mine as well as people I've met in Lyft rides when I was a Lyft driver that say, "Oh my gosh, you're the jingle guy," So I do that as well. Yeah. I've done some light scoring on films, really light stuff. I want to do bigger stuff and sound design stuff. But that's kind of all coming in the wings. I've reached out for licensing and have started that process. I know now how to do royalties and rights and all the other things. So it's been kind of a crazy ride of learning,
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here to share what you've learned with us. There's a lot of energy being put into the local music scene over here in Richmond, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how it works over in Tucson.
Well, the way that most of the culture of music works here, there is a large amount of venues, but they're not always like made for music. There's ones that are restaurants or little bars, like you're saying, or there's little pockets of kind of divey places that they turn into venues. And people have started to realize that live music, at least here, there's DJs that keep coming in and, hey, we just want a DJ, right? Especially some of the new places, because you just have one guy to worry about and he changes the music every time, right? But there's still a lot of support for live music. People still like the atmosphere of someone being really right there and expressing the art form. And there's luckily a lot of styles here. There's a lot of kind of eclectic mix of people and musicians that either work in one band or in many, like me, right? So there's that kind of culture first. And then as far as the way that they bring people in, there are different organizations or even people that really will pay for the musicians, right? I get offers for hundreds of dollars to play somewhere, but I also get offers of like, we'll give you like 10% of the bar, or, we'll give you food and drinks and maybe like $50 a person. So everyone has their own deals, but they all recognize the importance of the music. And I think that that's already what's in the heads of many people that are supporting the scene. So that's kind of like the first step is like, are there enough places that want the live music element? That starts a whole trend, right? And luckily there's enough people here and enough artists. I mean, pretty much everybody here is like a musician, or at least claims to be. So you have that, right? Everybody wants to be a part of that culture as well. And the other good part of it is there is some levels. There's really good musicians here, and none that I've encountered. I mean, there's maybe been a couple, but pretty much 90% of the musicians I encounter that are good or better or even starting to grow their sound, right? We all interact well. There's not really a competitive element usually. I don't worry about like somebody stealing my stuff or trying to like, give me drama, which is nice. We're very supportive. So that helps too, right? Because there's not bands fighting or whatever. And then the other part of it is just constantly talking about it, posting about it. I do a few different ways. You have a question about how I approach the online promotion aspect. I've learned how to do the Facebook advertising. It's fairly simple. I can even do a separate video if people ever wanted to learn how to just make their own kind of advertising for Facebook, because that helps with just the visibility. I tend to kind of pop those out the week of a show to just remind people that we're still out there, because that's the other thing is there's so many of us, right? So you kind of have to remind people that, oh yeah, you exist and this is your music and here you go. Maybe I'll go check that out if I'm not watching Netflix or going to a nice restaurant with my date or just getting in a random spontaneous evening, So that's part of it is the, visibility. So that's something I do. Facebook advertising. I also know how to do, I've taught myself how to do Google AdWords, which is where you can do anything from have, your little small PNGs of whatever you're advertising on a page that Google search engines, right? If somebody is searching for local music or they're searching for videos of musicians or even like music equipment, that's when you would see the ads. So you can even kind of direct people that way with the marketing aspect. And same thing with YouTube. You can have, those video ads that play before everything now on YouTube. You can be one of those video ads. We've had those campaigns as well. So
you're really taking a holistic online approach, gathering people who are searching online, getting them to go to Facebook, and ultimately converting them into people at a show. That's not easy to do. How did you manage to learn all that?
To be honest, I probably watched a few demo videos on it. I was just interested. I was trying to think, because one of the things I started to realize too is because the capacity of artists that exist in the city, as well as my actual physical time to actually try to promote things. You can't just grassroots things as easily anymore. People don't want to be bothered usually as much in person about something. So if you kind of throw it in the feed or in a kind of YouTube pre-video ad, that's when you start to get the visibility element of marketing, right? That you kind of need. And I don't have to be there. I just put it on a timer and set a schedule and that makes it a little easier. People at least have the I know that I'm not going to make huge dividends off of being out there all the time, but I have always have people coming up to me saying, I saw you guys on this Facebook ad, or I saw you at the show and this friend told me about you. So I saw you when I went on YouTube and I was checking out just like, rock and roll or something, because, you targeted the advertising. So there is some element of that. You do have to learn, look at statistics too, if you get to that point.
Yeah. So do you feel like your online marketing has gotten better results over time?
I think that it does based on what you're trying to talk about. So it's the content, right? If I'm having a huge CD release, then I notice that more people are paying attention because it's an event, right? There's a release of a record. If it's just another show, it's not going to get as much visibility unless you're targeting a certain audience. So in those cases, I play locally, right? So I usually just target the Tucson, Southern Arizona, Bisbee, some Phoenix, but mostly like the Southern Arizona people, right? So you think any of those cities, Patagonia, Tubac, any of the cities that are kind of around Tucson, Sierra Vista, and then you get more results based on that. Like you start to kind of read the statistics, and that's kind of just important as an analytical approach. It saves you money as well as, So I've started to actually market, as far as results, I've started to market by spending less money and getting more views or whatever interaction with the
Well,
ad. So
let's say you have a show coming up. What's going through your mind as you approach your online marketing?
So I still do a lot of word of mouth on my own because I have friends that like the music. But I also, when I book a show, I try to think 2 months before the show what I want to do. So I think about the flyering aspect. I create the flyers with Photoshop. I've learned how to use that now as well. I think about the advertising campaign, who I want to target, and how long. Sometimes it's better to do short bursts of the week of, and that way it's kind of like boom, it's relevant, it's there, and then it's gone. It's not like there for weeks and then people are just annoyed that it exists, right? So there's that aspect, that marketing. I also obviously think about performance, because the people that do come to see the show, when they see you perform live, you show this cool product, of course, in your advertisement or whatever. You also have to perform well, I think. Otherwise, I don't know. At least that's my personal things. There's plenty of bands that have advertised really well that aren't amazing in the world of music, as we've all discovered. But that's one of the things I think that's important. So you have these steps, right? You book the show. That's kind of the first thing. You figure out how to get paid or what you're getting paid or if that works for the band, right? You make sure you coordinate schedules. I use Google Calendar to do that. Coordinating schedules. I still text people. I still text the band members just in case, because you never know. Life just happens all the time. And then, the process of flyering, Facebook event. I pretty much create the Facebook event immediately because that seems to be the main way that people visibly know where it is, what time it is, where it's, most of my friends are local, right? So they see that event, right? And then the next step is obviously the advertising and getting the songs ready for live performance. Beyond that, I just try to make sure that we are constantly trying to play out, because then you get that element of, okay, this band is around. They're a part of the scene. They're part of what's happening now, right? And then, those are kind of the basic steps. There's a lot of musicians that won't go through all that just because it's maybe too much work for them, or maybe they don't have, maybe there's a learning curve on something they haven't learned yet, or, maybe, yeah.
Do you feel like you would be successful even if you didn't do those things?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think that the biggest thing at the end of the day is still performing well. So that's kind of my number one. And then after that, it's the look that you present. So in my opinion, yeah, the advertising element, whatever you do advertise, should look clean, nice, high quality photos, high quality website, maintain things, let people know, try to let people know beforehand what's going to happen, right? So that way you're not last minute, begging people to come see you or something. It's more like you just kind of prepare all that stuff in advance as you're going along, and then you just see what happens. I've had some success with people that I've never met coming to see the shows because they have seen an ad, but I've also had people walk in. I've had friends of friends bring friends kind of thing, right? At this point, I think that everyone who can see and hear you, if that's what you want to do, like, because there's angles, right? Some people just like to play. But if you really want people to see and hear it, then that's what you have to do. Put it everywhere. Put it on every market you can. We can talk about profit margins after, but
I've also seen you promote other music. Tell me why are you taking the time to promote other bands and do that kind of thing?
If people are listening to music in this city, then people are listening to everyone. In my opinion, you there's no reason to have, like, your style is not necessarily going to be like the style that moves a nation or whatever. So look at everybody else. What are they doing? There's a lot of great artists here. Why not talk about that and pump them too? And I was going to bring this up because you asked this later in one of your questions, how many musicians show up to watch other musicians in your city? And I'd say about a third of them are musicians, and not all of them are vocal about it. Some of them will kind of pop in, and check you out. I've had friends from many bands that are here, we'll pop in and just to check you out, just to see how you're bringing it, and it's not competitive.
Mm.
It's more like kind of respectful, really, and kind of nice. And
Yeah, definitely. I always enjoy performing somewhere and seeing other musicians from around town who had time to make it out. Yeah, I just wanted to real quick give a shout out to Richmond Musicians Association, and a thread had been started on Facebook about how to overcome some of the challenges here in Richmond. And Scott Alexander had brought up that he's worked for New Boswell for a couple of years and would have loved to offer more varied options of live music, but BMI, ASCAP, and et cetera have made it basically financially impossible for them to do.
So here's the thing. He's completely right. So performance rights organizations like CSAC, BMI, ASCAP, when bars are opening or venues are opening, part of their ability to play live music or even to have a jukebox going is due to the fees that could be charged to the bar, the venue, or whoever's trying to have that music, because performance rights organizations protect musicians' rights to have performances of their music or recordings or anything that's sold, right? What kind of, performances you have and where they're held. I mean, there's so many fees. You just think about an accountant firm for musicians, right? That's what PROs are trying to protect. And rightfully so. I do get paid performance royalties when I perform, so I understand what they're doing. But yeah, they've surprised a lot of people who don't pay those fees, and that could hurt the scene. Yeah. There are some times that I will not even claim a show from a place that I am not sure if they're actually paying those fees, because I don't want them to get shut down or in trouble, right? So that's one thing you always have to think about going in. But yeah, these performance rights organizations are also important for the musicians. For example, probably over the years I've made a few thousand based on royalties. Usually those royalties end up just paying for the same digital distribution fees, or I have to travel somewhere, or I have to pay off an instrument that I had to buy, because I needed a different sound, or I needed a new guitar because the other one was going bad, and it happens, right? So, because, the elements can get to any instrument. So there's always things that are going to come up. It's just the maintenance of musicians. But they're important because they help track your digital royalties, your performance royalties. When you register your songs, it's not exactly copywriting, but it's giving you the rights to those songs that you created, and you can sell the songs, you can license the songs, which is important. I've started to get into that, where you can try to get placements in film or in shows, advertising, and those PROs are pretty important for that. There's musicians that I've known playing for a decade or more that still don't know. You register your songs, you put it in your performance royalty dates you've played that year, and you get paid quarterly. I mean, that's
just curious. What are the going rates over there for bands?
Give you the skinny.
Give me the skinny. Yeah.
All right. Again, it depends a lot on the businesses. The restaurants that are newer tend to want to bring in more business, so they can end up paying a little more lucratively. Anywhere I've seen from $100 for a couple hours, all the way up to $500 for maybe a 3 or 4 hour kind of thing.
So $100.
There's places that are bars that'll do that kind of thing.
So are you talking per, like, okay, so is this the
no, not per musician, just as this is the rate for everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's not far off from what we're seeing around here. $100 for a couple hours, $500 for you're saying 4 hours
full
show?
Band, yeah, full band.
The full band's got to split that up, right?
Yeah, and there's sometimes you go to some of these places that are way more dive bar like, and they really just do percentages. So they may do 10% sometimes your take's lower, anywhere from 100 to 150 for around a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show. There's some places that'll have a different deal where it's like, hey, $50 each musician for the time, and that's it. And you kind of do some negotiating in email because again, it's about presentation. So when I send these emails to venues, I don't just send a cold email with a few sentences and say, hey, is this date available? I give them an availability time span of usually a few months. And I also give them our pretty much what you would call like a press pack, right? Our name, our bio, our links, our videos, because visibility I've started to see is a lot more important, right? Of not only music videos, but live videos, right? Because then they know what they're getting. And that's tended to get a quicker response. I mean, at this point, we do have a lot of people that are offering us gigs that we're not all taking. So that's a good place to be in. But then you start to also think about, do I like the room? Do I want to get paid more versus where the venue is, right? So there's a little of that happens when you do start to make more money on it.
I kind of asked you earlier what you do once you have an event and it's almost like post getting a show. Those are the things you're starting to. So you've gotten the show, and then you do the flyer, the promo, and all of that of it. And so tell me more about this. How are you getting shows?
Well, you have to message these venues. It helps to either go to shows or to kind of look at what's going on around you. Every time someone mentions a venue you've never heard, put it on a list. Put it somewhere where you'll check it out later. You can look into the website of the venue if it has a decent website. You can look at pictures pretty quickly on Google and find out what kind of room you're in. And it's stuff that I actually learned a lot more how to use when I was touring. Because when I'd want to know about a room that I've never been to in St. Louis or something, right? So it's kind of the same approach, but luckily the element of being local is very easy because they know that you're going to show up pretty easily. And based on your presentation, what you give them in that first message, in that first email, the language, and I can give you all kinds of examples of this stuff too if you're interested in ways to craft emails and kind of a little bit of the jargon, but also kind of, how to talk and what to give as far as content. That's kind of important. That's your first foot in the door. And after they know that you're also going to do the flyering, Facebooking, and some advertising online, that usually ups things a little more. People do tend to like bands playing for longer periods of time so this is something I wanted to talk to you about, the verses of bills being like, do you play a bill with multiple bands, or do you just play a show where you have to play for 3 or 4 hours, maybe throw a few covers in there? I found that it's usually more financially good for the band when you can perform more music.
Absolutely. I mean, people have access to all kinds of music, and really brings me to this next topic I wanted to cover is over in Tucson, are local radio stations featuring local music?
Great. I'm glad you asked. People here listen not just to Clear Channel and corporate stations. People listen to Pandora, Spotify, and we have 2 radio stations that are local that are highly, highly adamant about featuring local artists. One of them, which has been big and for a long time, is KXCI. I'm a member of this organization and I donate to them. And they're a great local radio station. They have a great studio that national acts as well as local acts play in their studio. And they film, they do audio, they do interviews. Pretty much every release that's coming out, they're on top of. They have a whole local music radio show with Matt Milner here. And they enrich what we're doing and make it so much more possible for people to care about what we're doing. So that's a big thing. KXCI, and then there's a new one called Downtown Radio, which was just started by Jason LaValle, and he's doing the same thing. He's doing it bare bones from the bottom, and it's been kind of amazing to see him be out and about And I tell them all the time, like, you're doing great stuff for the music scene. It's nice to have another station trying to promote local artists. So yeah, there is a great culture of that. And I think that makes a difference, as well as some of the partnerships that you asked about. Venues aren't always competing. We do have many, but they do work together. And sometimes, you know, it's just a matter of coordinating between them, or what artists go to those venues versus, you know, what they have on their schedule. There's tons of local community events like Tucson Meet Yourself, Tucson Folk Fest, the Blues Review by KXCI. We have string and fall street fairs on 4th Avenue, which is a main street. Parades, pub crawls, the All Souls Procession is big. Over 150,000 people come to there, and a lot of them aren't even from here sometimes. So Battle of the Bands things, a lot of writers of the articles and the journals that are here not only review art and music and food, but they also review music, and sometimes those people are also performers. So it's a really enriched culture for art. And yes, the community itself, through the organizations that exist here, feature it all the time. So that's a huge thing. If you have that kind of infrastructure starting or even beginning in Richmond, that needs to be fostered big time. That'll change the game for you guys, I think, in a bigger way than you think possible. So that's one thing I definitely wanted to make sure that you knew about what's going on here. So
yeah. So what's something that musicians here in Richmond, what's the first thing that comes to mind that we should be thinking about when getting gigs?
Presentation. So most musicians already think about the live music element, at least, you know, the ones that are really adamantly into it, right? They really enjoy what they do. So that's number one. Be good live. Practice. Make sure that your stuff is ready to go. It may take a few months. That's okay. You know, if you want to learn enough material to play longer shows, that's okay. Take the time and do it. It's worth it. And then when you go play, you know, or when you want to go play, then you start thinking about booking. First message is important. So if you want, after this podcast, in the next day or so, I can give you a sample of what that would look like. And basically, you want to give them a time span of, I think what's smarter is months, like at least 2 to 3 months of time span. Try to hook up all your band people on the same email with a Google Calendar or something where you can all look at that. And then after the booking message, right, you think about the professional aspect of how am I going to do promoting for the event, who's creating the flyers. And one thing that I think all bands need is, before you really start going out there, is at least a professional photo shoot. You can have it be with a friend who has a great camera and maybe knows a few things about Photoshop, or you can teach yourself a couple things, right? If you know someone who does that, make them pop, have a good 5 to 10 press images. And then when you submit that booking message, right, that's in your links, right? You have links to your website, Facebook if you don't have a website. I usually do both. A link to music, that's one of the big selling points. If you have any videos that are live that are decent, and vet them, make sure you pick the ones that are decent, because that's the time they're going to see you. That all would go, and I'll send you that message of what I usually give, and that way people can have an idea what that is. So those are the big ones, right? You've got practice, make sure you're good live, have a really good booking email and message when you contact these guys. And yeah, sometimes you might have to physically go drop off a CD and talk to them. So be prepared to do that, right? And then the next point, promotion, flyering, visibility with advertising. And obviously, you know, beyond that, just start to analyze what's happening when you do that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just wanted to wrap things up here. Can you go ahead and give us a way to find more information on your blog, your music, and other things that you might be into?
Awesome. So I'll give you a couple of things, but I will send you an extra message probably in the next day or so that has at least the booking message that you need. I might even send you a list of what I think the halves any band should do. And that way it kind of gives you a starting point. But yeah, as far as if you want to check out what I do and kind of, you know, how I frame things, I've got the blog that features local artists. It's called Desert Noise. You can find it on medium.com or, medium.com at Desert Noise is usually, because we're in the desert, Arizona. So there's that. And then I also have a website, jacobacostamusic.com, as well as mason.band. So it's not a .com, that's a .band for the blues band. And you can kind of see with those websites are a little different. One's more of like a landing page that I built, because I do that too, actually, designing websites. And then the Mason one's a little more kind of interactive, a lot more tabs, and because that stuff is really hopping right now. So I got to make sure I'm pushing that. But that's at least the first two places you could go to check out my music or what I'm doing, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, and kind of maybe get some initial ideas of what you should shoot for if you want to try to do this more professionally, like I've been doing for a while. So
yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time here. And hey, do you mind if we go ahead and maybe listen to one of your tunes for the outro music? Maybe Rockstar Paperboy.
Go for it. This is by Mason. This is the first track off of our Midnight Road record, mixed by the man you're listening to now, Chris Robinson.
Can I borrow a cigarette? No, it's not my addiction. You just sound like a crazy mess to arouse my suspicion. Keep on sitting there, little girl. I'm just impatient.